The explosion that tore through the convoy left Staff Sergeant Sarah Kane alone in hostile territory with half a magazine, 2 cracked ribs, and the kind of silence that only comes after something has gone catastrophically wrong. But that wasn't the moment that changed everything. The moment that changed everything was 30 seconds later, when Master Sergeant Daniel Reeves grabbed her wrist with what was left of his strength, pulled her close through the smoke and the blood, and said 3 words she could barely hear over the secondary explosions and the approaching footsteps. 3 words that made no sense. 3 words she would spend the next 6 days turning over in her mind like a stone with something underneath it. She didn't know, lying there in the rocks with her shoulder dislocated and her ears still ringing, that those 3 words were the only thing standing between her and a conspiracy that reached from a forward operating base in Helmand Province all the way to the 5th floor of the Pentagon. She didn't know that 2 separate teams were already being dispatched, one to rescue her, one to make sure she never made it home. She didn't know that the ambush had been planned not by the Taliban, but by an American officer sitting in a climate-controlled briefing room 12 miles away. What she knew, in that moment, was this: the ambush had been too perfect, too coordinated, too precisely timed for 3 simultaneous angles. And Daniel Reeves, who had been in Delta Force for 22 years, who had survived 4 combat tours and 2 wars and 1 assassination attempt that officially never happened, had known it was coming. He had known, which meant he knew something she didn't. And now he was dying in the rocks with a severed femoral artery, pressing a small SD card into her palm, and using what might be his last coherent breath to tell her something she couldn't fully hear. Welcome to Legendary Veterans. Tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today, and stay with us, because the 3 words Sarah Kane couldn't hear in that valley are going to mean everything by the time this story ends. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. September 2009. The convoy had been moving since 0600, for vehicles rolling through a valley that Reeves had flagged twice in the preceding 48 hours. He'd brought satellite imagery to the colonel's briefing the previous evening. Recent imagery, showing movement patterns in the high ground that didn't match the intelligence picture they'd been given. The colonel had looked at the imagery for exactly 8 seconds. Mission proceeds as scheduled, he said. We've got confirmed intelligence on the target compound. Window closes at 1400. Sir, with respect. Dismissed, Sergeant. Sarah had been waiting outside when Reeves came out. She'd read his face over 3 years, the particular tension around his jaw that meant something wrong he couldn't yet articulate. He's not listening, she said. He's not listening. A pause. I need you to stay close tomorrow. If anything happens, nothing's going to happen. Sarah. His voice had the register it only had for direct orders. If anything happens, you keep moving. You don't stop for me. She hadn't answered. She'd looked at him and decided not to argue. In the second vehicle the next morning, the valley had the quality experienced soldiers learned to recognize, an absence where there should be presence. No birds. Nothing moving except the convoy itself, which felt suddenly and horribly like a procession moving towards something it didn't know was waiting. You feel it, Reeves said. Not a question. Since the first bend. He keyed the radio. Viper 2 to command. Request halt. Valley shows no civilian activity. Requesting dismounts on the eastern ridge before we proceed. Negative, Viper 2. Keep moving. He turned to Sarah and said something she almost didn't hear because the lead vehicle hit the IED at exactly that moment, and the world became fire and noise and the specific weightlessness that comes from being thrown against rocks. She came back to herself face down between 2 boulders, rifle still in her right hand, left shoulder completely wrong. She found the angle, bit down on the rifle strap, and shoved. The whiteout lasted 4 seconds. When she could see again, firefight from 3 directions, overlapping, professional spacing. Suppression fire from the high ground with the patience of someone not worried about ammunition. Someone with a resupply line. This wasn't a hasty ambush. This had been planned. Reeves was 15 meters to her left, dragging himself toward cover. Femoral, high on the left thigh, the kind of bleed that gives you minutes. She got her tourniquet on him and tightened it past the point of comfort while he gripped the rock and said nothing. The radio in the wreckage crackled. All units, immediate withdrawal. Carter and Reeves presumed Kia. All units withdraw. Sarah and Reeves looked at each other. They think we're dead, she said. No. Controlled, thin. They want us dead. There's a difference. He reached into his vest pocket. His hands were still steady. 22 years of that kind of training doesn't leave you even when you're bleeding out. He pressed an SD card into her palm, and then a compass, old military issue brass, scratched from years of actual use. Everything's on there. I found it yesterday in a server he thought was scrubbed. Names. Wire transfers. Authorization codes. It goes up. He paused, a cough that he suppressed with visible effort. Further than Mitchell. Someone above him. Someone with Pentagon-level clearance who has a name I've only heard once. Olympus. Who is Olympus? I don't know yet. But it's on that card. Taliban fighters were moving through the wreckage 60 meters upslope. Sarah could hear the voices, the boot steps on gravel. Go, Reeves said. He pressed his sidearm into her hand alongside the compass. Move east. Get to the high ground before they sweep down. Don't use the radio until you're at least 5 clicks out and you've confirmed you're not being tracked. I'm not leaving you. Staff Sergeant. His voice had the register it only had when he was giving a direct order and expected it to be followed. You are carrying the only evidence that can expose this. If you stay here, that card gets taken and burned, and 20 people who sold weapons to the Taliban continue to do exactly that, and the men and women who die because of those weapons will have died for nothing. Including the team we just lost. He held her eyes. Now go. That's an order. She went. 30 meters into the rocks, she heard him open fire behind her, drawing the sweep toward himself, away from her. She found a concealed position, counted 15 fighters moving toward him, watched him fight until the magazine ran dry. He looked up, directly at where she was hidden, as if he'd calculated exactly where she'd be, and said 3 words. She couldn't hear them. Distance too great, noise too constant. She could see his lips move, count 3 syllables, short, deliberate, but the words were gone in the gunfire and the wind. Then the grenade. Sarah pressed her face against the rock and gave herself 15 seconds. Not to grieve, just to let the weight of it settle into her body, where it would live now. Then she moved. East. High ground. 5 clicks before the radio. She didn't know yet that those 3 words were the answer to the question that would nearly get her killed 6 more times before this was over. For 6 days, Sarah Kane operated alone in Helmand province with a dislocated shoulder. She'd reduced herself, 2 cracked ribs, half a magazine of ammunition, 1 SD card, 1 compass, and the specific cognitive clarity that extreme stress produces in people who have been trained for extreme stress. She wasn't just surviving. She was thinking. On the 2nd day, she intercepted a Taliban radio transmission that had been patched through a frequency she recognized as American origin encryption. The message was brief, professional, and in English. American female operator confirmed alive. High-value target for Olympus. $100,000 for live capture. Do not terminate. Olympus requires her intact. Olympus again. They wanted her alive. Which meant they knew about the SD card. Which meant Reeves' suspicion was confirmed. Someone in the intelligence chain had known what he'd found, and they'd known before the convoy rolled out. The ambush hadn't just been about eliminating Reeves. It had been about recovering the evidence before it could reach anyone who would act on it. Sarah sat in a rock cleft at 11,000 feet and thought about that for a long time. Then she went back to work. What she did over the next 4 days was not heroic in the way that word usually gets used. It was methodical, patient, and cold. She hit an ammunition depot on night 2. 1 shot, a rigged timer. The valley lit up 30 minutes after she was gone. On day 3, she disrupted a patrol by dropping their radio operator and ammunition bearer in the first 2 seconds, then firing into the rock faces to create the impression of multiple shooters. The patrol broke in 4 directions. She recovered a functional radio from what they left behind. But day 4 changed everything. Moving parallel to a logistics route, she spotted vehicle activity at a small compound 2 kilometers north. She took a position in the high ground and put her scope on the courtyard. 2 American military officers were meeting with Taliban commanders. She knew one immediately. Colonel Alan Mitchell, her commanding officer. The man who had denied Reeves' request to halt the convoy. The man who, according to Reeves, had made a phone call the night before the ambush that he wasn't supposed to make. The second American she almost recognized, a face from briefings, from chain-of-command photographs, from somewhere in the architecture above her pay grade. General officer's bearing. Insignia of someone who significantly outranked Mitchell. She photographed everything she could get at that distance and light. And here is what none of her training had prepared her for. Standing at 11,000 feet watching an American general conduct what was clearly a routine meeting in a Taliban compound, she felt something settle in her chest that she would later describe as the moment the world became a different size. She'd known Mitchell might be compromised. She had not known how far above Mitchell this went. The man's face was on a wall at FOB Hartwell under the heading chain of command. His name would come to her 18 hours later, like something clicking into place. She encrypted the photographs and kept moving. Subscribe to Legendary Veterans right now, because Sarah Kane is about to make a decision that will put her in the crosshairs of two different teams, and only one of them is there to bring her home. On day 5, she risked the radio. Short transmission, emergency frequency, battery pulled immediately after. Alive, convoy was deliberate, Pentagon-level evidence, need extraction. She didn't know that her signal was received by two separate operations centers simultaneously. One was a legitimate, day-adjacent element quietly tasked with finding her after signals intelligence flagged a possible survivor. Their orders were to bring her out and protect what she was carrying. The other was a black operations unit running under direct authorization from the man she'd photographed in the compound. Their orders were to recover the SD card before it reached anyone who would act on it. Secondary orders, if recovery was impossible, ensure she never made it to a debrief. For 22 hours, both teams searched for her. She found them first. On day 6, watching from a position she'd held for 4 hours, she spotted two Blackhawks approaching a flat area she'd flagged as a potential LZ. 8 operators exited. Professional movement, good dispersion. She counted them twice and watched how they moved. 7 were clearing the LZ outward, standard perimeter establishment. The 8th was scanning the high ground systematically, not covering threats, searching for a concealed position, looking for her approach vector. She keyed the recovered radio. Extraction element. Viper 2 actual. Need primary authentication before I move. Web protocol. 11 seconds. Then, Viper 2, Bravo 7 Whiskey. Reeves code. Confirm. They knew Reeves protocol. Legitimate DI. She exhaled. LZ is cold. But your southeast operator at bearing 140 is running a search pattern, not security. He's looking for my approach vector. The team leader pivoted. The southeast operator broke for the tree line immediately, which told her everything about his actual orders. 2 operators caught him before he made it 10 meters. She came down from the rocks. How'd you know? The team leader asked. His pattern. And I never transmitted my approach direction. Someone briefed him on the most likely axis. That's not information a rescue element needs. He nodded. Keller wants to talk to you on the bird. He's been watching Mitchell for 14 months. You just gave him what he needed. The helicopter smelled of hydraulic fluid and gun oil. Sarah sat across from the man introduced as James Keller. 50s, silver-templed, with the kind of face that had stopped bothering to express more than was necessary. He opened a folder and turned it toward her. One photograph. Official military portrait. The face from the compound. The face from the briefing photographs. General Robert Crawford. Theater commander. FOB Hartwell's chain of command wall, second from the top. Olympus, Sarah said. Keller nodded. Crawford's been running a weapons diversion operation for 26 months, Keller said. Mitchell controlled what went into mission briefs and what didn't. What convoys rolled and when. The SD card Reeves gave you has encrypted financial records, 14 months of transactions, authorization codes, enough to prosecute 20 people, including 3 members of a congressional defense committee. We couldn't move without it. Everything at Crawford's level routes back to people he controls before it reaches anyone who'd act on it. How long before he knows I've been extracted? 12 hours. Maybe less. Then we have 12 hours. Keller almost smiled. The smile of a man who'd been waiting for someone to say exactly that. Crawford is running a classified briefing at FOB Condor tomorrow evening. Closed session, his territory, people who either work for him or owe him enough not to ask questions. He paused. I want you to walk into that room, already dead. He laid out the plan efficiently. A staged helicopter accident. A body, 12 hours of Crawford believing the problem was solved. The way that belief would make him careless in a room full of officers who owed him nothing but professional loyalty. Sarah turned Reeves' compass over in her hand without realizing she was doing it. Reeves died getting that evidence out, Keller said. He chose you to carry it specifically. I've read both your files. He wasn't wrong. But I need you to decide. You give me the card right now. I take it through formal channels, 18 months minimum before anyone sees a courtroom. Or you walk into that room. 3 words. She still didn't know what they were. Tell me the plan, she said. FOB Condor. The following evening. The briefing room held 22 officers when Sarah Kane walked through the door. She was in full uniform, clean, her shoulders strapped, her expression the specific neutral of someone who has decided what they're going to do and has stopped spending energy on the question. The room reacted the way rooms react when something appears that shouldn't be possible. She heard her own name said 3 times in the first 5 seconds, by 3 different people, in 3 completely different tones. Confusion. Recognition. One that was neither of those things. A sharp, controlled intake of breath from the direction of the podium. General Robert Crawford stood at the front of the room with the particular stillness of a man whose threat assessment is running very fast beneath a very still surface. He was tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had spent 40 years in rooms where bearing mattered. His eyes moved to her face and stayed there. "General," Sarah said, walking directly toward him, the SD card visible in her right hand. "I believe you've been looking for me." His hand moved toward his sidearm. 4DI operators materialized from positions around the room, behind the projection screen, beside the door, at the two rear corners. Weapons drawn, calm, economical. Keller stepped from the side room where the audiovisual equipment was kept. "Don't, Robert," Keller said quietly. "It's done." Crawford's hand stopped. His face went through something complicated and landed on a cold fury that had nowhere to go. Sarah set the SD card on the briefing table. The room watched it the way rooms watch something small that everyone suddenly understands is important. "Master Sergeant Daniel Reeves found this on a server you thought was scrubbed," she said. "He died getting it out. Because you sent a convoy into an ambush you'd arranged to kill him before he could deliver it." She held Crawford's eyes. 14 people. You sent 14 people into that valley." Crawford said nothing. 26 months of weapons diversions. Wire transfers, authorization codes, Taliban acquisition requests matched to American supply manifests. 3 Senate Armed Services Committee members. 2 defense contractors. And you. She paused. Every file transmits automatically to 4 recipients if the card doesn't receive a check-in every 8 hours. The copies are already in transit. Crawford's voice, when it came, was quieter than she'd expected. Reflective, almost, the voice of a man who has stopped performing. "You have no idea what you've actually done," he said. "This war cannot be won the way Washington wants to fight it. The Taliban has a 20-year patience horizon, and we have election cycles. Economic leverage in this theater means weapons, controlling what they have, who they depend on." A pause. "I was shaping the peace. You were selling missiles that shot down American helicopters," Sarah said. "I treated 3 of those casualties. Don't call it peace." She held his gaze. Was Reeves shaping the peace? He trusted the institution his entire career. He died for it. You don't get to call that strategy. Crawford looked at Keller. "You'll never convict." "I have people. You have lawyers," Keller said. "I have 26 months of records and a congressional investigation sealed for 8 days waiting for this card." He nodded to his operators. "Take him." At the door, Crawford looked back once. His expression had settled into something unreadable. Not resignation, not contempt. Something between them or beyond them. "Reeves trained you well," he said. "He did," Sarah said. "That's why you're in handcuffs." Keller stopped beside her as the room began to move again. "There are 3 names at the top of a supplementary list on that card," he said quietly. "We've had surveillance on 2 for 6 months. The 3rd is going to surprise you." He glanced at her. "We'll need someone to walk into another room. Same terms." Sarah looked at the compass. 48 hours, she said. "There's somewhere I need to go first. Arlington National Cemetery." The marker was simple, the way Reeves would have wanted it. She stood there for a long time before she said anything, which was also the way he would have wanted it. She'd learned from him that silence before speaking was a form of respect, that words said too quickly were usually the wrong words. She placed the compass on the stone. "I still don't know what you said," she told him. The 3 words. "The valley was too loud, and I was too far, and by the time I could have asked you," she stopped. "Steady. I've been trying to figure it out for 2 weeks. I've gone through everything. Every conversation we had, every debrief, every piece of what you knew that I didn't. And I think," she paused, "she'd worked it out on the helicopter back from Condor. 3 words, short and deliberate, mouthed across 30 meters of valley. Not trust no one. She'd thought that first, because it fit the situation. But Reeves was always more specific than the situation. Read the compass. She'd examined it every day for 2 weeks. Both sides, every marking. On day 7, in the right light, she'd found a hairline seam in the base, almost invisible. Inside, folded to the size of a thumbnail, a slip of paper with 12 names in Reeves' handwriting. Names not on the SD card. The ones he hadn't had time to upload. She'd given the list to Keller 6 days ago. 3 of those names were already in custody. She picked up the compass and looked at the marker. 8 more, she said quietly. "You knew I'd find it. You always trusted my timeline." She pocketed it. "I'll bring it back when it's done." She turned and walked across the quiet cemetery, her footsteps steady on the path. Somewhere, a briefing was being prepared. A room she'd be asked to walk into. She was already thinking about the angle of approach. Subscribe to Legendary Veterans, because Sarah Kane's war isn't over. It's just changing theaters.